Hello, and welcome to the Tips with Tony podcast. I'm Tony Marinucci, your registered dietitian, helping you get healthy one bite at a time. I'm very excited for you guys to hear this next interview. In front of me, I have Jen Esker, and she is a doctor of physical therapy who, if you're not following her on social media, you need to right now. It literally is just such incredible, helpful content. She's does such a great job of explaining it. You can tell she's brilliant, but she puts everything in very simple terms. And the visual aids, like I wish we could do some visual aids today with the podcast because I'm sure it would be a lot more helpful, but definitely you guys need to check her out on Instagram. And I will put her tag in the show notes so you can follow her and get more of that information. But without further ado, Jen, welcome to the Tips with Tony podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for that wonderful intro. So honored.
You're so welcome. You're so welcome. So the first question I always ask my guests when they come on is to introduce yourself by sharing who you are, what you do, and why you do what you do, which is probably the most important part.
Yeah. So, you did a good intro. I'm Jenna Scare, doctor of physical therapy, all things movement lover. I think movement has just always been a part of my life, and I've been very fortunate to have that as a natural lifestyle all growing up. We were kind of made to be in a sport growing up. My parents, that was a requirement, which I appreciate. It just taught me so many life lessons, and what I naturally gravitated toward was gymnastics. And so I learned so much awareness about my body, strength and mobility, and all of these amazing things. And the only thing that fascinated me through school was like anatomy and biology. And so I just knew, I didn't know where that was going to necessarily take me, but I knew I loved gymnastics. And then I started coaching gymnastics, and then I started teaching Pilates, and it was like, kinesiology, the study of human movement. That is the only thing that sounds interesting to me in college. So that's what I went into. And from there, I started interning at a physical therapy clinic and just seeing how a physical therapist really would watch movement or guide movement, and how you're with and walking the journey alongside a client, right? It's different than being in a doctor's office where they don't have a lot of time to see you. You're in and out, and hopefully you get something that will help within that small session. But with a physical therapist, you were really seeing the journey, because they were coming in 2 to 3 times a week and really seeing it. And at the place where I was at as an aide, I really got to walk like a lot of the journey with these clients. And so it was such an amazing opportunity that I was just like, okay, physical therapy school, like that's the thing. And I never thought it would take me to where I am now. I used to say business, that's over my head.
Mm-hmm.
um, but I just continue to follow my passion and see, you know, what was coming next. It was an accident to grow on social media, but it started to happen. And from there, I graduated, started educating, and people really received it well. And so I was like, okay, let me do it more. And from there, it's turned into programs and app, podcasts, so much more. And I'm just, every day thriving in the gratitude of it all.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And honestly, I think just it's in your nature because the very first thing you said, you were felt fortunate to be able to move. And I'm like hooked on just that one sentence because unfortunately I feel like most people forget we might complain a lot. We forget the basics that if your body is able, that is a blessing because unfortunately not everybody have that opportunity. They're not able to play sports. They're not able to walk every day or all those things that we really do take for granted. So I think that sense of gratitude probably has grown with you. And I also will just add, I too was like, when it came to business, I'm like, I don't know what that is. Like, I know how to be a dietitian, but like, I don't know how to run a business. But like you said, it came to you, right? Like when you loved helping people, if you love helping people, then having your own business, you can be in charge of that and it can only grow more and more and more. And so I love that. I can relate to a lot of that stuff. So that was really, really
Yeah.
great. Awesome. So yeah, so what I wanted to I had a couple questions, and then I definitely would love to learn more. I know you have something called the mobility method. You have the Optimal Body podcast. So I definitely want to talk about that. But first, I just had a couple questions that people kind of submitted to me, and then I'm curious as well. So the first thing that I think would be super helpful for our listeners is, I'm sure there's many, unfortunately, we have like injuries or pains that we can't go over all of them, but I'm sure you could probably tell us maybe like 3 of the most common injuries or places where people experience pain. And then I'm sure you are good at this point, but if you could try to explain maybe some exercises someone can do to kind of help with those. I know it's based off individual needs and stuff like that, but maybe just some basic concepts, like maybe some stuff that you've shared on your Instagram, like your IGTV and stuff like that.
Yeah. So here's the thing. It's like we've been conditioned, I think, in our society to say, oh, here's the problem, here's the fix. And we're always looking for that one fix. And that's where, just like you said, the body's individual. And even though, so you can find exercises throughout my whole Instagram, right, at Dr. Fit, and really see so much, but you will see a video for low back pain one moment that looks different for a video for low back pain a second moment, like the next day, right? And so how are we still addressing the same thing but doing completely different things, because it's dependent on your body. And that's why I always say, like, we've gotten in trouble with Google a little bit because we're looking and we're searching for the answer and for that external source rather than really taking the time to get to know our bodies and get to know what we as individuals need. And I just have to say that first, because even though we'll go into, you know, those injuries and those common types and what you can start to do, but it depends on where you are in your journey. Some people, they have low back pain that they're, you know, this has been years and I'm not going to stop my life for it, so I'm going to keep lifting. So some people are really strong with low
Are you
back pain.
talking about me?
Is that what's happening?
Literally me. Like, literally, like I haven't been lifting because every time I do it just gets aggravated and I have to pause. It's just frustrating, but I hear
Yeah.
you. So,
And
anyway.
then we have the other spectrum where it's like, well, I have pain, so don't move, right? Anything I do is going to cause more pain and I'm afraid. And we have that other side of the spectrum. And then we have people in between.
Right.
So, which sounds like that's probably where you are, where you want to lift and sometimes you do, but then you pull back because you get pain. And then, you know, and it becomes this like, I'm in the middle and I don't know what to do.
Yeah, that's it.
And low back pain, 100%, is one of the most common diagnoses that people have. The question is, why? Right? Why is that probably the most commonplace? And so when we think of progressive overload in the body, we can't just be thinking physically. And I saw someone tag me in a post the other day, and it was such a great depiction because we think of progressive overload as like you're not warming up enough, or you're not, you know, or you're progressing in weights or exercises too soon. But it's so much more than that. Where if we think of this bucket, yes, we have movement, we have joint capacity, we have, you know, tissue tolerance and all these other things that we can talk about, but we also have life, and we have stress, and we have food, and we have mindset, and we have all of these other things. And when they all start compiling on top of each other and it starts to overflow, that's where we get in trouble. And our body is really good at going, whoa, 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 this is too much, and we need to protect itself. So your body internally is always going to have this mechanism of, oh, this is scary, how can I protect you? And think about it like when someone scares you and you go, and everything gets really tight, right? And your hands get pulled in, and we take a deep breath in and we hold it. Well, that's that, you know, if we think of that fight, flight, freeze system, that sympathetic, right? And it's natural. It's so automatic. It's part of the autonomic nervous system because it's automatic, and your body kind of tenses up. But now think of that mechanism that's happening. That's your body naturally going into protective mode. So now if I feel something, or if something else in my bucket is overflowing, so it doesn't even just have to be movement. If it's life, if it's stress, if it's relationship, if it's food, if it's alcohol or whatever is starting to really compact and overflow in that bucket, the body's going to go, oh my God, I don't have enough tolerance for this. And it starts to, naturally protect. And where we have a lot of like these nerve endings and kind of feel everything is more so along like our pain track within our spinal cord. We have more sense and area in our low back and in our neck. And where are the most common places that people get pain?
Wow.
Low back and neck, right? And so if we just start to say, oh, like it's just my body's way of talking to me. So it's not necessarily that I'm moving bad or I need someone to smash out my back because my tissues are super locked up. Why are your tissues locked up? Where else in your life could you be adding into this bucket that's suddenly overflowing and you don't have, and your body, your mind, your system as a whole is feeling like it doesn't have control over it and it needs to go into protective mode. And especially when we're talking about low back pain that has been over 3 months, even if it's like returning back pain, right? So even if it's not a elongated time period of 3 months, but even if it's like on for a month, off, like on and off, and it's been 3 years, 6 years, 5 years, whatever it may be, right? And if this continues to happen over and over again, we have to take a look not only at movement, not only at massage, not only at the things that can kind of release that tissue right then, but we have to take a look at all of the other things, which is where you come in very handy as well, right? Because food is a component of that. Lifestyle and what you're putting in, how you're eating, when you're eating, all of these things. Like people don't think of that like food like that. It's, I know you talk about this, it's so related to what's happening in life and in the mind as well. And it's not just, how many colors are you getting in or what kind of food? It's so much more than that. And that's the same with movement. And so one of the things that I like, especially when I'm just going on a rant, so I'm sorry about that.
No, good. No, you're amazing. I could listen to you talk all day. Go.
So when we talk about the low back and really coming back into what is the main thing, especially in that moment of like really, say you have a spasm or something is happening where it's that moment of getting locked up and you're like, oh my God, I shouldn't move. I shouldn't bend down. I shouldn't do anything. How can we start to address it right then? If we go back to that breath system that I kind of talked about, where your body, as I take an inhale and I hold, your body gets locked up. So what's the opposite of that? Exhale. So if all I started to focus on is extending my exhales longer than my inhales, and even shifting to more of a nasal type breathing rather than a mouth type breathing. Again, think of when you mouth breathe as like when you need to suck in air, you're running, you're, that frightened stage. That's when you need to really suck in that air and your body goes into that sympathetic. So again, if we just flip the switch, what is opposite of that? Nasal breathing. And there's actually studies to kind of prove that nasal breathing really does help to shift us into that parasympathetic system, that rest, relax, digest, that lengthening of the tissue, that letting go, that decrease of tension. And if we start to talk to the nervous system in that sense, so that what I like to do, especially with the low back, whether it's putting a hand on the low back or laying on the ground, sitting against a wall, something that's going to have like that proprioceptive feedback and that palpation into the back so that you tell the back you're supported, you're safe. And literally thinking like this. I know it might sound woo-woo, but it's real, guys, especially when it comes to low back pain, right? So touching it or putting your back against a wall or a couch or something. And then I like to place the hands along the low rib cage here. And this is my way of saying, where's my breath coming from? Because a lot of times, again, if I'm in a scared, tense state, what's going to react first is my chest. I take a breath in, everything comes up toward my ears and it elevates into my chest, right? So if I want to decrease that tension and really emphasize where my diaphragm is, which rests right underneath my rib cage, and I want to take a little squeeze on that rib cage, I want to let it expand and relax, and I want to get that movement back into my rib cage with my back supported, with my nasal breathing, with longer exhales, and I guarantee that give me 5 minutes of that, you're either going to start crying because you're going to be like, where'd the pain go? Which has happened many times on the table, as I've had clients. And, or, you're just going to feel something different. Like no matter what, you're going to feel something different.
Yeah. So, oh my God, I had so many thoughts just now. Which is one, I want to just say I'm really happy that you're here because I feel like a lot of people who are probably listening to this, like it's like if you've had back pain, you've probably been to physical therapists before. And like any profession, there's good, bad, and everywhere. But I feel like you really do go that extra step. So I've heard from a lot of people that they went to physical therapy and it didn't really do much, and it's like, obviously we know that's probably because they didn't do the stuff at home, like there's a whole other side to that.
Yeah.
But the point being is that like I think there are other layers to it, and just like your nutrition, you can eat healthy all day long, but if you're not exercising, if you're not sleeping, if you're not hydrating, if you're not managing your stress, then really you're still not going to be a healthy person as a whole. So I definitely hear that. And I wanted to share this with you because I'm sure you mentioned it just now a little bit, but it's so weird because as much as this back pain has been bothering me, and I've literally like some days like it's like I can't sit for too long, I can't stand for too long. When I get up, I'm super tight. It's like really unbearable. And then when I made the appointment and I went there, I'm not gonna lie to you, I was like, and it was literally before they even saw me. And it felt like a child who when I was a kid and I would get like sinus infections and I would go to the doctor, and then the second I'd get into the doctor's office before they would even treat me, somehow my sinus headache went away. And I think what you're sharing right now, it kind of makes sense. I feel like it's just that relief of just like knowing that someone's going to help you, or that you have like an outcome or like end in sight. And that just makes so much sense to me. And so I feel like if there's any lesson here, like yes, work on your breathing and take care of that, and take care of yourself and pay attention. But also too, it's like probably just stress management in general would be like key to that stuff, and like relieving, and like so anxiety and worry, and just like reminding yourself like it's going to be okay. I feel like that alone, like you said, like even just touching the back or talking to yourself, like that would be really, that's like so simple, but I don't think people know that.
Exactly. I mean, it's just not talked about. And we switch, the name of the game within what we've been taught about pain. Because what we've been taught about pain is bad. As soon as something happens, I need to fix it right then. Pain is good. If I didn't have pain within the body, that's bad. If I didn't know when I felt something, then I have zero alarm systems to let me know when something's happening. I have zero alarm systems to know when it could be deeper, when I could be stepping on a nail, when I could, no matter what it could be. I mean, my grandma's back was on fire for months and months, PT over and over again. No one referred her. I mean, it still frustrates me. It was before I got into PT school. But she kept going to physical therapy, back pain hurting, not getting better. She was a smoker her whole life. Like, hello, send her back to the doctor and say, rather than saying she's not doing her exercises, what else could be going on? And that's where physical therapists get to do better as well, rather than just, trying to there's so many red flags that we've been taught. We've been taught differential diagnosis, and this is where it's different than going to a massage therapist or getting your trainer to stretch you out. And this is where it's good to have a good team around you, that it's okay to go to your physical therapist. Your trainer is your trainer to get you strong, right? To help you move. Your massage therapist is there to make you feel better and to allow your body to maybe move fluids and move a little bit easier. Your physical therapist is there to determine the cause.
Right.
And when we really start to see, okay, treatment isn't working, movements aren't working, when your body feels pain, it gets to alarm you when something else is deeper. And it turns out my grandma's back was hurting because it was in her bone. So she had cancer from her lung that had spread to her bone. And and that's where, again, pain is good. That alarm system for her drove her to the emergency room at 3 a.m. because, she'd done the PT, she'd done the things. And finally, it was so unbearable, she couldn't lay down. But that's when they finally diagnosed it. And that's where pain is good.
Right.
Without pain, we don't get to see what else could be deeper happening. We don't get to see when the body is talking to us. And so if we can flip this switch as to how we feel this pain and what is it telling me and when is it hurting, and when we start to observe that, it becomes so much more powerful. Because I've had clients come in too where, exactly what the story you just told, where it was like, oh my gosh, I was like in pain over the week. And then as I came closer to coming to see you, it started to get better and now it's not hurting. And I just want it to be in pain so that you could tell me and look at it exactly. And I'm like, okay, let's assess that though. Right?
Yeah.
Let's look at that. Why do you think that is? And she's like, well, when I'm at work, I'm sitting all day long. And I'm like, okay, are you sitting all day long? Like, do you get up? Do you do stuff? And she's like, yeah. I'm like, okay, how about on the weekend? What do you do on the weekends? And she's like, well, I'm going to the games and I'm doing this. And I'm like, okay, so you might be moving a little bit more, but also, are you sitting at the games? Are you sitting in your car? Are you sitting on these different things? And it was getting better. So why do you think that is? If you're sitting at work, but yet you're sitting at a game, watching a game for 2 hours for your kid, how is that different than sitting at work, right? So can we just blame sitting? And she's like, huh. Um, right? And if we start to actually look, so what was actually different then? Job, not working.
Right. Like stress, not stress. Yeah. Happy, not happy. Yeah. So many things,
Yeah,
I'm sure. Yeah.
exactly. And when you start to just really start to observe that. And I think it's okay to confirm when you're having pain. It's also okay to confirm when you're not having pain. So find those moments when you forgot about it, when
Mhm.
you were running, when you were doing stuff around the house, when you were taking care of someone and you completely forgot that you had pain. If your body is able to not feel the pain, then that's a signal to tell you it's possible. We always start to then come back and focus, but it hurts when I do this. It hurts when I do that. Yeah, but it changes,
Right.
right? And maybe for some people it doesn't. Again, this always depends. Is it disc related? Is it facet related? There's so many different things that, it can go deep into the body where it becomes specific and there are certain movements, but we also get to observe if I've done that movement before and it hasn't had pain, but then I did it another time and it did have pain, am I just searching for the pain
Mm.
or am I searching more for the moments without pain?
Mm.
And what I find a lot is that our mind tends to shift into the bad. It's so much easier to shift into the bad, what I don't have, what I can't do, well, I can't touch my toes anymore, well, I can't sit on the floor, well, I can't do this, well, I can't do that, rather than what you can do.
Right.
But can you reach overhead? Can you get out of bed? Can you stand on your feet? Can you squat? We we lose focus on what we do have and what we're grateful for until it's gone. Like, oh, now my back hurts. And now I'm only focused on my back and what I need to do. But we don't take appreciation for it before.
Mm. That
And
is
not
so
to
powerful. That's like a life lesson. It
not to
really is.
shame anyone for it, right? And I've been guilty of it as well. I've been in the habit of beating myself up to look a certain way rather than being in the gratitude of what I actually have.
Right. Right.
And we're all guilty on it on some levels. It's just, again, continuing to come back to the awareness, and it's never going to be perfect.
Mhm.
It's just, what am I choosing today?
Mhm.
And what am I choosing in this moment?
Mhm.
And what are the things that I can do that I know start to shift it? So even if you just started to work on that breath stuff a little bit more, even if you just started to break down the movement that you used to do, that you want to do, and slow it down, unload it, do it differently, do something different with it. Stop in that position right before you get pain, breathe in it. See how it feels. Do it again. Do it again. The more that you start to focus on, oh, I can do it, maybe it needs to look a little different. And that's what us as physical therapists, we're doing all the time, right? We're correcting you, we're changing different positions, and we're putting things in different places. Ultimately, we're just having you do different.
Mhm.
And if you just started, my favorite thing is when someone comes in and they're like, oh, well, it hurts when I let me find it. And they're looking for the thing, right? If that's what's hurting, don't do it. Don't find it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do
Yeah.
something different. And then we can start to see how we can go back into that movement and how we can progress back into it. And in that stage, you're more empowered to understand that it's possible rather than, oh, I just can't do that anymore.
Mhm.
Oh, I'll just never have that ability.
Right. Right. Yeah. And anytime we focus on the negative, the can't, what I don't look like, what I'm not able to do, all those things, it's not helpful.
No.
It's really just it's a rabbit hole, right? So I love that approach. I think this is awesome. So, okay, well, so you mentioned the lower back is a
Yeah.
common area and the neck is a common area. What would be one more?
Well, let's go through like the joint by joint method. So there's a joint by joint method by Gary Cook. And what is cool about this is it kind of points out the main areas of pain and the main areas of what we're avoiding and why. So if we look at the body just, and we can go, what should be, this is very general, by the way. So this isn't going to be like the end all be all. We want strength and stability all places, and we want mobility and movement all places. But if we just look in a very general aspect, we could break the body down from like each specific joint. So if we look at the neck, it should be a little bit more stable. If we look at the upper back, it should be more mobile. Low back, a little bit more stable. Hips, more mobile. Knees, more stable. Ankles, more mobile. Feet, more stable. Toes, more mobile. And that's a really easy way. Now, if we look and we think, what are the places that people usually complain of more pain? It's usually those places of stability, the neck, the low back, the knees, and the feet. Think plantar fasciitis, stuff like heel pain, stuff like that, right? And what we end up doing is we say, oh, your low back hurts. You need to strengthen your low back or strengthen the core. We need more stability. And we just focus on that. Oh, your neck hurts. We need to just do chin tucks. We just need to strengthen and stabilize. What we forget a lot is that what is happening above and below that area that we might be neglecting. And that's the mobility areas. And it is so incredible when we actually start at that mobility stuff before we go into, or as we're going into strengthening, we actually are able to affect it so much more, because what could be happening is in a place that needs more stability, like the back, and the place that needs more mobility, like the hips and the upper back, like right above and below it, if we're not moving well through these areas above and below, what's going to end up taking on more pressure where it needs to be stable, and now it's taking on more mobility, is the back. And it gets away from those areas above and below. But now if I start to open up those areas above and below, the upper back and the hips, think of the pressure that takes off that low back, right? And same with the knees. If I just stop focusing on ball squeezes and what I need to do at my knees, and I actually start thinking, how are my ankles moving? How are my hips moving? How's my big toe? Have I even thought about my big toe lately? Exactly.
My nickname is Toe, so I think of, people call me Toe. So now every time people call me Tobo, I'm gonna think of my toe.
There you go. And
My
what you can do
actual
is
toe,
strengthen
except
it
for
or
myself.
stretch it. Yeah. And so again, it's like we just think of it easy. I like to point this out because it doesn't have to be difficult, and there doesn't have to be one movement, one exercise. If you just say, oh yeah, my hips are pretty tight, my hamstrings, my quads, my hip flexors, my glutes, they're pretty tight. Have I been doing any of the breathing stuff to actually get my system to downregulate? Before, I mean, you're not going to increase mobility if you're not downregulating. It's just not going to happen. You're going to be the person who's chronically foam rolling, chronically stretching, and you're like, it doesn't work because you're not downregulating. So you have to do that breath stuff first as you're doing the mobility, and you will be so impressed and shocked. And then you can come thank me later when the low back starts to feel better, when the neck starts to feel better.
So, okay, so as you were saying that, what I thought of was yoga. I feel like yoga, you focus on the breath and you focus on movement. But like there was a point, and not to bring it to the negative, but there was like literally a point where like even certain yoga positions were too painful. So like I had to even stop that. So I guess like in those situations, would you just say find a new posture, or I don't know, or what are your thoughts on yoga in general for this? Because I feel like that's a nice way to focus on your breath and your stretching at the same time.
It could be. It's so hard because it depends on what kind of yoga you're doing. I would say yoga is meant for mental practice. And if you're going in for that mental practice, not to be thinking you be getting more mobile 100%, but you also could be just like increasing those mobility places where you shouldn't be. Like if I don't have good upper back or good hip extension, I'm going to put it all into my low back. And that's going to take the brunt of everything. If I don't have good shoulder and thoracic movement, I'm going to put it all into my shoulders here and my low back. So again, a lot of yogis end up getting low back pain, SI pain, shoulder pain, because they're not actually focused on the areas that need the mobility, the upper back, the rib cage, and the hips area as much. Or they're focused on one area of the hips, external rotation, pigeon pose, lotus, rather than internal rotation. And so there's still things that we're missing. And if we step away from yoga and say, yoga is an amazing practice for your mind, for connecting that mind body, getting that breath, exactly like you're saying. And if we step into yoga expecting that, I think it's great.
Mm-hmm.
But if we're expecting it to fix us, I don't think that you're doing it for the right reasons.
Right.
So that's where I say it has to be a specific mobility exercise, because it's not just stretching, but it's actually activating around that range as well. And
Mm-hmm.
that's the difference between flexibility and mobility, where flexibility is just gaining passive range, but it's not functional. And mobility is actually saying, okay, we want to increase the range of this muscle tissue or joint, but we also want to increase the capacity of what it's able to take on in terms of load and strength.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where getting with either a physical therapist, or in the mobility method, there's a whole self-assessment, having some way to assess rather than just guess is
Right.
so helpful in the body. And that's, yeah,
Yeah,
I'll
well,
say about that.
that was great. That was great. Thank you for clarifying. Since you mentioned it, and I did want you to definitely talk about it, can you maybe tell the listeners a little bit more about what the mobility method like is and how you started it, and if someone wants to do that assessment, where they could go for that?
Yeah. So the mobility method, docgenfit.com, I mean, will have everything. Even if you just probably Googled the mobility method, I'm sure it'd pop up. But docgenfit.com/mobility is the mobility method website itself. And that is going to take you through, there's a 23 movement assessment, which don't get overwhelmed. It's lifetime access. So it's a one-time payment for lifetime access, because my intention is you're not going to go into this program and get it done in a month.
Right.
It's not happening, or a week. It's something to start to get to know your body and come back to over and over and over again, because we're gonna have injury, we're gonna have pain, we're gonna have different things pop up, and you don't need to be the expert in it, but you get to really start to become more aware of your body, and it's going to take time, so it takes just time to start to get to know that. And so in the mobility method, 23 movement self-assessment, based on what's restricted, it will guide you into, here are the movements that help with this restriction. Again, it's up to you to determine what feels most restricted and what movements really help with your body. So I give like an idea of 4 to 5 that can help. I want you to pick like one,
Mm-hmm.
1 to 2. And then based on those 1 to 2, I want you to say, I can do this every morning before I get out of bed. Or I could do this as a warm up every time before I'm going to work out, or as a cool down, or I'm going to do it before bed, or I'm going to do it to get me out of my chair at work. Something like, how can you just pop it in and splash it into your day? Because I also, you have to think of like our mobility and the places that we want to keep like rejuvenated and moving and healthy. Think of it like your teeth. If you brush your teeth every day, you wanting to prevent cavities. If you do your mobility every day, just a couple things every single day, you're going to help to prevent injury. And
Mm-hmm.
so when we start to think of how can I sprinkle it in, rather than, oh, I need to add another hour to the day, which isn't going to happen, right? I'm
Yeah.
not going to do it. I don't expect anyone else to come up with it. So just sprinkling it in it becomes so beneficial for the body.
I love that. That's so helpful. Thank you so, so much. I want to be mindful of your time, but is there anything that we didn't go over that you feel like the listeners would want to go over? Can you maybe just touch about Optimal Body podcast and where you got that name, Optimal Body, and then we can like wrap it up and we'll let people know where they can find you.
Yeah. So optimal body I actually came up with a really long time ago. So it was when back in Snapchat days when I used to do that all the time. I would always write down my workouts and I would take a photo of it on Snapchat, and I would get so many people screenshotting it. But the other problem is I'd get people who were like, what's that exercise? What is that? What do you do for that? And I'm like, well, I can't explain it through Snapchat, nor do I have time to record my whole thing. So sorry, you get the screenshot of what I just did. And so I decided, what if I actually did teach people how to do these movements? Because they're different than regular movements you'd go into a workout class. So that's where I came up with the Optimal Body membership, where you get to just work out with me, learn with me. It has functional HIIT workouts, core stability workouts, and mobility flows. So you don't have to go self-assess. You just get to like pop in, do it with me. And my goal of that is just to continue to increase your awareness at the more that you do it. The more that you start to learn about your body, because I cue like crazy. I'm explaining why you would do something differently. I'm explaining how you can take on different variations of one movement. So my goal is to educate. And even if you stay in 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, I want you to walk out knowing confidently you can go into a workout class, knowing what you need for your body.
Mm-hmm.
And that's my goal. That's my goal for people, is to really start to understand movement and their own body, and knowing that there is no one optimal way to do it. It's what optimal means within your own body.
Mm-hmm.
And the more that you start to work with that and discover that, the more that you'll start to move better and feel better. And so that's where when Dom, my fiance, who's also a doctor of physical therapy, when he came into the picture and we
I
talked
love when
about
you
it.
guys do stuff together. It's amazing. We should probably add, if you have time, well, no, I'll just have people go look for it. And that was the one video you did about like sleeping postures.
Oh yeah.
That was great, because it's so true. The way we sleep, like for so long, I had this bad habit of like sleeping on my shoulder. And so obviously I'm going to get shoulder pain because like that's just my natural way of sleeping. And you have to be mindful of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry.
No, you're
Sorry, I
good.
just cut
So
you off. But yeah, so Dom is, and that's just super cute that you both are physical therapists.
I know. So cute. But yeah, when he came into the picture, we both saw the body the same way. We treat similarly. We were like, oh, let's do a podcast. Let's call it the Optimal Body, since I already have the Optimal Body membership, and continue to drive this message of just learning, education, absorbing, that optimal doesn't mean just movement. Optimal doesn't mean one way. It's everything. That's why we had you on the podcast, which people can hopefully go listen to. It's gonna come out so soon,
Yay.
and just so excited to continue to spread the message and educate.
Yeah, I really love chatting with you. I feel like our philosophies are very similar.
Mm-hmm.
We believe in the whole approach, right? It's not just one way. It's not just about the body. It's not just about your nutrition. It's not just about, stress. It's all where it all works together. And we both say the same thing. You have to find what works best for you.
Yeah.
And that's different for everyone. It's very individualized, and I love it. I love it so
Yeah.
much. So thank you so much for coming on. I really enjoyed this conversation. I feel like we could talk forever. I'm sure people are can people message you or email you? How would they get in contact with you if they wanted more like specific questions answered?
It's hard. I do my best to answer.
I'm
I
sure you get a
I
lot of messages.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
go through DMs, but you really want to get my attention, mention me in something, and I'll for sure see it. Um, emails you can email me, jen@docgenfit.com. You can join a challenge. I always do free challenges throughout the year, and I answer a lot of questions in that. And, just I'm doing my best to continue to put out the content so you could ask less questions and find the answers.
You have such great stuff, though. Really, though, I will say that, guys, definitely follow Jen on social media, because, like I said, like she has videos about low back pain. She has videos about proper ways to sleep and just like stretch, mobility, all these things that chances are, yeah, if you're looking for something, you could probably find it. But yeah, if not, screenshot this episode, share it on your story, tag me and tag Jen. Let
Yes.
us know what you got out of it, and then she'll definitely answer your question.
There you go. Then I'll be able to see you for sure.
So just I'm gonna put it in the show notes, but just remind people what your handles are.
For across the board, it's Doc Gen Fit.
Doc Jen
So
Fit. Mhm.
Yeah, Instagram, YouTube. YouTube, we also post the PT Pearls. So in every podcast episode, we have a PT Pearl where we answer a question or go over a diagnosis and make it easy to understand. And then we go into the interview. So the PT Pearls are all posted on YouTube because it is a lot more visual when you're talking
Yeah.
about the body, you know, so easier to find at there at Doc Gen Fit.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. This has been wonderful. Guys, definitely go follow her. If you're not already subscribed to the Tips with Tony podcast, definitely hit the subscribe button. If you're listening, if you're a new time listener, welcome. If you've been listening for a while, thank you. Thank you to both of you. Jen, this has been great. I really, really enjoyed this conversation.
Me too.
Awesome. All right, guys. So I am Tony Marinucci, your registered dietitian, helping you get healthy one bite at a time.